Welcome to Wildlife Conversations. I'm your host, Jen Ritchie, and this is our 20th episode. It's so exciting. From Sweden to South Africa, my guest today took a giant leap to follow her dreams to be a photography guide. Her images now reach thousands of people via Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and her beautiful work showcases the magic of the continent she loves so much, including Kruger National Park. Through her editing course, ebooks, workshops, YouTube, her podcast, she is teaching photographers how to capture wildlife at its best. I can't wait for you to hear her story today and learn from her. Welcome, Karolina Norée. Hi, Karolina.
Oh, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and thank
Oh,
you for
well, you
having
deserve
me.
it. Yeah, I'm so excited. We sort of met through Maureen Matson. She did a workshop
Yes.
with you, a whole did she do like a whole week with you or 5 days?
Yes,
Oh,
exactly. Yeah. So Marine, who's like the kindest person on this planet,
she is.
she joined me in Tanzania, and that must be now almost 3 years ago,
Oh, wow.
which is crazy. Yeah. So she joined me in Tanzania for a whole week of safari with a fantastic group of people, and we had some of the craziest sightings that to this day I haven't had sightings like that again. And yeah, we just had an incredible time. And then she told me about your podcast and
hmm
asked me if
hmm
I wanted to come on.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm so glad you're joining us. It's gonna be fun. And I was telling you before we started recording that I was listening to your YouTube the other day and I heard Maureen's voice. I was editing and I heard Maureen and I didn't even realize that her like several days of her trip are documented on YouTube with you, Tanzania. So everyone needs
Yes.
to look that up. Yeah. That'd be so fun. They
Yeah.
could see a familiar face with you. And you guys saw a buffalo kill and a lion take a baby out of a womb. Like
That's like to this day the craziest sighting I have ever had, probably. And I don't think I'll ever see anything like it again. Yeah, we saw a male lion take down a female buffalo who
Mhm.
was quite sick. And so he took her down quite easily, and I think it was actually quite merciful for her to be killed
Mm,
by the lion.
mm.
And then it turned out when obviously the lion started eating, they pulled out a fetus and turned out she was pregnant. And this female lion then walks with this fetus. So sorry for anyone who feels like this is a bit gruesome, but it's nature and it's quite
Mm-hmm.
an incredible thing to witness. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's just a little bit like a
And
little bit
you
of how
you
crazy
give a
that trip
warning.
was.
You give a warning on the video
Yeah,
too.
I
Like you
do.
say, like if you need to fast forward, go to this point. And I did a little bit. I did a little bit. I'll be honest.
Yeah, because it is quite gruesome.
Well, if you're here with us today, joining us live, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us. And you can say hello in the chat and say hi to Karolina and tell us where you're listening from. I know it's like midday for us, but it's evening for Karolina. So we could have people from all over the world listening. So tell us where you're from and say hi, and we'll have question and answer in a little bit. But Karolina, I am so um, intrigued to know how you decided to make that giant jump from Sweden to South
Yeah.
Africa and you know what that took to do that because it's just had to be hard.
Yes, definitely. I think what made it a little bit easier was the fact that it was never really like one of those that like, okay, now I'm moving to South Africa tomorrow. Like
Hmm
this is what
hmm
I'm doing. It was one of those things that kind of grew into. It all started with coming to South Africa the very first time, just after I had graduated our equivalent to high school, and I just wanted to like travel the world, do like a gap year kind of thing, and do something different. And I ended up at a horse safari place where I was volunteering for 2 months, which was one of the most magical things I've ever done. And I remember thinking on my first day arriving there, seeing my first giraffe, and I was like, I was blown away by the size of this thing, and how it was like we were driving to the pool because we were going to see everyone else at the pool, and then we were driving there, and here's a giraffe, and like, it was crazy. And that to me, like the whole lifestyle and the whole like wildlife and everything, I remember thinking 2 months is never going to be enough. I just knew it right there. And then I was like, 2 months will never
hmm
be enough.
hmm
And since then, I was like, okay, how can I do this? And what would that look like? And I was like, just felt something drawing me back to South Africa. And then ended up coming back and obviously knew that like I can't just move to another side of the world
Right,
just like
right,
this and give up my life in Sweden. So
right.
I decided to come back and do my guiding course and learn to become a safari guide. And that would enable me to be in the country for a little bit longer and like figure out some way of living here and so on. And also figure out like, is it just because I'm on holiday or is it because
Right,
this would be a place for me to live?
right.
And so I came back about a year and a half later, did my guiding course, and that's when I met my fiance, or now fiance, Craig. Uh, and then obviously that kind of just made it all kind of align.
Mhm.
The fact that I wanted to be here and he was here already, and then through him I was able to get a visa and everything. So it was kind of like one small step at a time. And then all of a sudden I was more in South Africa than I was in Sweden per year. And I was like, well,
Mhm.
I live here now. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like how it happened.
yeah. We've talked a lot about that on the podcast, how sometimes like the thing you want and that you're made to do, um, it takes a while to find it. And then when you look back, you can kind of see those steps, like you were just saying, that took you. But there's a magic, there's something you want, and then it just might take some steps to get it. And that sounds very familiar to a lot of people's stories. But it's so important that when you do find that thing, to like start taking those steps to find that magic and do
Exactly.
what you're made for.
Yeah, I think definitely about like following your passion and following what feels like the right path and the right
Mhm.
direction. I didn't know that I was going to do this and what I do today. It was something that I grew into and that kind
Yeah.
of merged out of a lot of other things, and that just kind of made sense as I went along. That the next step, this makes sense. The next step, this makes sense.
Yes.
And then, as you say, looking back at it now, I'm like, okay, wow, this was all leading me to this today, and that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. But if I would have been too scared to take some of the leaps along the way, I would never
Yes.
have ended up where I am today.
That's right. That's so true. We've talked about that too. It's like sometimes you have to do things scared and see how it works. Yeah, and learn from the mistakes if it doesn't work. But yeah, I hear so many people say that in their stories. So and also a good point is like it was hard work. You didn't just have like this
Yeah.
Instagram following and YouTube like
No.
immediately. You worked really hard to do that. So everyone's
Yeah,
listening, like, no, like if you're in your teens or 20s, like it doesn't happen overnight. You have to work really hard. And yeah, that's
absolutely.
true.
And there's also no cut clear path to like how to make it work. I think
Yeah.
for me, the social media was started as like a fun place to share my photos. I remember specifically one of my friends being like, you need to start an Instagram. And I was like, oh, that's so cringe. Like, I don't want to do that. And and then she was like, you never know where it might lead you. And she was so right.
She's
And I'm
right.
so grateful for her pushing me to do it. And in the beginning, it was just a place to share my photos, and just also connecting with other photographers because I hadn't done that before.
Right.
And then eventually I started seeing more and more how there was other people out there doing this as a job, and I was like, wow, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. Could I, in my situation, make this work somehow?
Yeah.
And then it kind of grew from there, and that's where like I get a lot of people asking me like, okay, what can I do? Like, what university do I need to go to? What do I need to study? This and this. And there's no, unfortunately, no cut clear path for this type of thing. You just kind of have to figure out in your
Right.
specific situation how you could possibly work towards this and how you could possibly make it work depending on your skills and
Right.
possibilities and wherever you live and all of that kind of stuff.
It's so true. So how did you fall in love with Kruger? Like tell me your first impressions and like what happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was that specifically that time where driving to the pool and seeing the
Yeah.
giraffe, like I remember so specifically. But also, I've always enjoyed photography
Hmm.
and always like done photo shoots with my friends and stuff when I was younger, like borrowing my dad's camera, and then eventually I got my own camera.
Hmm.
We did like little videos on our phones, making like murder mysteries and stuff. So like I've always enjoyed that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then coming to South Africa and coming to Kruger, the photography kind of naturally came with me. My dad was like, well, you need a telephoto lens, you're going on safari. And I was like, really? I don't know. Uh, and he was like, you can borrow. He had a telephoto lens that I could
Mhm,
borrow that was
mhm.
fully manual focus and was like push and pull zoom.
Oh,
I think it was a
wow.
70 to 200 or something. Yeah, fully manual focus, everything. And I remember missing so many shots because I had to get the focus manually. But I think that
Yes.
also helped me today, the fact that
Right.
I can, rely on that as a backup sometimes. But anyway, I took that with me and I was just like photographing the wildlife. And I don't know what it was specifically about Kruger, but I think it was just the lifestyle and the people around Kruger that just really made me fall in love with the wildlife as well. And then
Mm.
it is just anyone who's been on safari knows the magic of getting so close to these animals, and they're completely wild, but because we're in the vehicles, we can get very, very close to them because they don't associate the vehicle with either
Mm-hmm.
food or threat.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to get really close to them, and that magical feeling is like nothing else. And I think through my photography, I was trying to convey that to everyone back home of like, this is what it's like. Like these are the animals that are basically on your doorstep when you're living in Kruger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the photography came in. And I just merged these two, like this passion and then wildlife. And it just,
Yeah.
I don't
These
know.
two
And then
loves.
Kruger just became that solidified for me, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. You can see that love and magic in your images and in YouTube. Like I love when you see something amazing and then you'll turn to your GoPro and be like, did you just see that? And like you do feel like
Yeah.
you're there with you. Like, oh, you're thinking, I wish I was there with you, which is
Well, I'm so
good.
glad to hear that because that's what I try to do with the YouTube as
Yeah.
well. Is like because I come from Sweden and because I have friends and family back home who's never done this that I'm so close with and so on,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
know what it's like having no idea what this is. And through my social media, I want to show people this is what it's like to be on this incredible journey that a safari is. Yeah, so I'm glad that that shines through because that's
It does.
exactly what I try to do is just to
Yeah.
bring people with me of like, this is what it's like being on safari.
Yeah, it does. So I have to imagine, I think I heard you say, I don't remember if it was your podcast or YouTube, that like the first safari you took, or maybe second, you said to the guide, I want to do this. I'm going to come back and get my license. And he laughed. Is that true?
Yes, so it was I had been here for 2 months. I did the horse safari
Horses,
volunteering
yes.
thing, and then because I was on this cool adventure, my family were like, okay, maybe, or I think I pitched to them that they could come and like fetch me
Yeah, yeah.
and spend a week with me in South Africa. So
Perfect
they
timing.
came
Yeah.
out, yeah. So they came out on a holiday, and then we spent like the last week of my time in South Africa with them. And then we went on a safari. So obviously I had been on safari before because I'd
Hmm,
been,
hmm.
on in Kruger for the 2 months. And that was the thing. The guide asked, he was very horrible in many other ways as well. Like and that's what I think that's what we talk about in the podcast is he put us in a very dangerous situation with an
Oh,
elephant,
that's
but
right.
that's a
That's
different
right. That's
story.
right. Yes.
Yeah. So he was not a good guide. But anyway, he basically asked because you do that with guests, and I do that myself now of actually being a guide. You ask like just to find out kind of like are these first timers or what experience do they have? Like, do I need to repeat the very basic stuff or like what do I need to focus on?
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of suss people out a little bit. So he asked, like, oh, have you been on safari before, or whatever? And I was like, yeah, it's my parents' first time, but I've been in South Africa for 2 months now in Kruger, and like, and he was like, oh, were you enjoying it? And that's great. And I'm like, yes, I would love to come back and do my guide training because I would love to learn more. And
Mm-hmm.
that was basically what I said. And he laughed at me and was like, you can't do the guide training, like that's too difficult. And I was very shut down and I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, then
Mm-hmm.
maybe it is too difficult. Like maybe it is too physical or
That's too
whatever.
bad.
Like, and, but then a few months later, I actually came back to South Africa to visit friends in the same area again, just for a shorter holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And they encouraged me and they were like, no, of
Mm-hmm.
course you can do it. And this is a
Mm-hmm.
course that's going next year. Like you should jump on that. And they actually encouraged me to do it and pushed me, which I'm also very grateful for
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
obviously I was able to do it. And
Yeah.
I hope that that guide somewhere can see me on social media today. I don't think he'll remember me, but
Yeah.
still.
Can you see me now?
Hey, look.
He had the perfect opportunity to encourage you and lift you up instead of shutting you down. That's too bad.
Mm.
I wondered, like, as
Yeah.
a young female photographer joining that, if you felt like there were hurdles you had to overcome, or, you know, you were risking a lot to do it. And I'm just wondering how that felt and how it felt as a young female photographer and guide.
Yeah, I think it still is a lot of hurdles that I have
Mhm.
to overcome. I
Mhm.
find that um, I often have to prove myself
Mhm.
to guests that it depends on what guest it is, but if they don't know me from before or like whatever it might be, I sometimes have to prove myself more than I find that my male colleagues have to do,
Mhm.
and that I have
Mhm.
to like show them that I know what I'm talking about,
Mhm.
before they respect me and respect my advice. And
Right.
it's quite clear when that's the case, and it's not always the case, but it's quite clear when that's the case. But it's mostly when I'm freelancing for other companies where people haven't booked directly with me. When people book
Mhm.
a safari with me, I always have the most amazing people and I think it's because they already respect me.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
never have to like prove myself
They
because they're
know
already there
you.
on the trip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. They already know
Mhm.
me from social media.
Yeah.
But on social media as well, I do think that I have to deal with a lot of stuff where people think, like I've had comments of okay, yeah, but it's easy for a young female to do this. Like it's easy to get a following on social media when you're a pretty female kind of thing, when you're a pretty girl and whatever. And not really taking my photography seriously and
Right.
my skills as a photographer seriously.
Right.
And it's rather about, yeah, you're a pretty female and that's why you have a following on social media and that's why you have this success, and not the hard work that I've put into it and my skills as a photographer,
Right.
where I'm seen more as an influencer than I think other males in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
wildlife photography social media game
Mhm.
do, where people see me more as an influencer and them as a photographer. And
Yeah.
there's a difference there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but your work
Mm.
is so good. And I just watching YouTube, and we're going to talk about some technical things and teaching later, but it's so refreshing to me as I'm listening to you on YouTube, like hearing you teach. I think it's so important that women are heard teaching like that and knowing the technical, and that you are skilled, you are an expert, you know, and I just think that's so important to have that out there. We need more of it. We need more
Thank you.
women. Yeah, it's really good. It's really
No,
good.
I appreciate that. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that because I think, and I also, what I think my goal with it is also to have women who look like me with the blonde hair, and I like to put up on makeup, and I like to dress a certain way
Right, right,
sometimes, and
right,
whatever. Like
right.
that, it's not only the women who are and they are amazing as well, like the
Yeah.
badass, like crawling in the mud type of women. They're also incredible, and they are very valuable as well. But I think it's also to show that you can be feminine
Yes,
and also do these type of things that are uh, connected to some people think are masculine
absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely. Just because you're feminine, like more feminine, doesn't mean you don't have a brain
Yes,
and
exactly.
skills.
Yeah,
And so you
yeah.
referenced it before, but now you and Craig offer your own tours and workshops. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
so we do a lot of different things, but yeah, we've
Sure.
got together, me and Craig got our company Wildest Kruger Safaris,
Hmm.
and what we do with that company is one of two things, to just break it down for
Hmm.
in the easy ways. We've got
Yeah.
our workshops that I've actually just launched on Instagram today. So
I
for
was going
those
to
who are
say it just
interested there,
launched today. If anyone wants to
yes.
look, the dates for 2026 just launched today. Yeah.
Yes. So it's on my Instagram for anyone, and on both of our Instagrams for anyone who wants
Yes.
to look, or on my website as well. And that's our those are fixed dates and group workshops. So those are for those who maybe are traveling by themselves, or you also if you're traveling with someone, but you want to travel with a group. They're really wonderful workshops because with a group like that, you get to know other people who are very like-minded to yourself, and
Hmm.
you learn a lot from each other, and it's a really wonderful thing. And you get all these passionate photographers together, and it's
Yeah.
always really amazing to see all these strangers becoming friends throughout a trip like that.
Hmm.
So those are our like fixed date safaris, photo safaris and workshops. But then we also do tailor-made and private safaris, both with either with us as guides, like if you want us to guide you privately and specifically, then we can do that. Or if you just need help to plan your safari and you need to know where to go and how to do the whole thing, because it's very complicated to do that, then we also help you plan and book your safari. And
Oh,
then
that
obviously the
is
guides
smart.
on the ground help
That
you.
is really smart. I didn't know you did that too. That's really smart, because it
Yes.
is daunting. Being here in the States, it's daunting to think about doing that for the first time. And like, you don't know for sure what to do. Yeah, that's
Exactly. And that's what we noticed. And obviously through a lot of my social media, and also had friends and family back home asking a lot of questions. And, you know, safari it's a different type of holiday to book, because there's just so much to think about and there's so much out there, and it is daunting because you don't really, it's very difficult to find information about it online and how to book it yourself and stuff. So what we do is basically, like, guests come to us and they say, okay, I want to go to Kruger and I really want to see this and that animal, and I prefer a comfortable, but it doesn't have to be super top luxurious lodge, but I don't want to sleep in a tent, basically. And like, tell us a little bit about that, and then, okay, this is approximately how many nights I want to go for, or what would you recommend, this and this. And then we try to make sure that we can find something that fits into that person's budget, because it pretty much anything with safari is possible. It just comes down to budget. So we always try to work for, and our philosophy is a lot of like value for money. We try to not just like put you in the fanciest place just because it's the fanciest place. We try to find the places that like give you the most value for your money, and that fits into your budget, and then gets you the best experience for whatever budget you have, and for whatever needs and expectations that you have.
And you're also a photographer, so you understand if a photographer reaches out to you, what they need and what they want, which is different, right?
Absolutely. Exactly. So for photographers, for example, like something that we recommend doing is, okay, focusing on a longer safari, because you might see all the animals, but you might not get the shots that you want. So then you like focusing on rather for a longer stay rather than a luxurious stay for a short amount of time or whatever. Like, you start focusing on those things instead. And then things like private vehicles is for photographers is amazing. So then it also, that's something that we, you know, calculate into the budget. And again, it comes down to what budget people have. But if they're able to get a private vehicle, then we can help them organize that, and we send them to the places where we know it's possible and where it's maybe a little bit cheaper than another place, and so on. So that you can get a private vehicle and you can then decide where to go. Because if you're with a lot of other guests who are not photographers, then it's very difficult being a photographer. So those are the type of things that we think about. And then obviously we also know the guides at the different lodges. Like, Craig himself has worked at a lot of the different lodges in the Kruger, and been all over the place. So he knows which guides that know photography very well and which guides to request for photographers. So
that's amazing.
All of these type of things that we think about and that we help plan.
That is an amazing service. I hope people hear that and can use that. If they don't want to go, if they can't go with you, then they need to think about that, because it is daunting. And if you guys know so much, that helps so much. Yeah. It's wonderful. I didn't realize that was part of it. I did see the private part, but I didn't realize that was part of it. That's really cool. So you're talking about the many avenues. This is just one avenue. I know, like, as wildlife photographers, we have to have so many avenues to try to make this all work.
Exactly.
So you've also created a lot of teaching. You created a course, the Lightroom editing course that you do. You teach on YouTube, and I hear you teach a little bit on your podcast too. And I think you've done webinars in the past. Is that right too? There's just a lot of
okay. I thought I said kind of stuff like this, but
yes. But it just seems like you're piecing that together too. Like, it's really important to you to have the teaching part with it.
Yeah, I love teaching. I've always enjoyed teaching. My mom's a teacher, and growing up, I always thought I was going to be a teacher, and I've always enjoyed, like, I don't know, just teaching people things and seeing something new, you know, click in the brain and so on. I think for me, it just became very natural to combine that with the photography as a avenue of being able to make a living out of it, because it is difficult as wildlife photographers to figure out how do you make a living out of it. And teaching for me was the way to do that, and that's where I feel like I can give some type of value, and therefore be able to make a living out of it. So that just came naturally for me.
Yeah, I think you're a really good teacher. And I was going to ask you, like, is there a moment that stands out with a client that you saw it click like that, or their aha moment in their photography? Is there a moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think the best part, the thing that I love to teach the most is the low key, high key photos.
Hmm.
Because I think people um often get like stuck in this okay, it needs to be perfectly exposed kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that's great as well. And that's 100% something I teach too, is like, okay, this is how you get your perfect exposure and this is what you think about and so on. But then when you have a situation where you can play around with a high key or a low key photo, where you're creating something that your eye can't see, and where your camera is capturing something different to what your eye is seeing,
Mhm.
that's the moment where like people are often, I just love it when I'm like, okay, now go like +2 on your exposure compensation. And people are like, +2? Are you crazy? Like what? And I'm like, just trust me. Like, you know, if you don't want to get creative, that's fine. You don't have to. But if you want to get creative here, this is an opportunity to go like +2.
Yes.
And then they do it and they're like, whoa, okay,
Yes.
this is
Yes.
something different. Or like -2, and you're like, just to get like a rim light or something and like just
Yes.
get some details or whatever it might be. And they are like, what? Oh, yes, exactly. There we go. What a great segue.
I was like, I think there's a cheetah somewhere.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. So this is was one of those moments on my last Tanzania trip now, a couple of months ago, where we got an opportunity with rim light, and and this is for those who don't know, that rim light is the light around the fur, with the sun highlighting the fur here around the cheetah, so you just get that silhouette.
Oh,
And we got photos as well with just like normally lit photos that are just beautifully backlit and you're normally exposed. But I said to my guests, I'm like, okay, here's the opportunity for low key and a rim light opportunity. So go like -2, -3,
mhm.
and then you get this. And the most amazing thing was afterwards, I think the next day, my guests were going through the photos, and one of my guests showed me his result, and he played around with it in black and white, and it looked amazing.
Mhm.
And I was just like, this is what I love so much, is when I've been able to give you an idea that wasn't there before, and like, and
Yes.
you've created something beautiful out of it, and you've also done your own twist on it, making it into black and white, for example,
Right.
like
Yeah.
getting into the creative mind. Like, I'm not saying do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're also doing your own thing, and I just love it. It's my favorite
I
thing.
can see it. I can see it in your
Yeah.
face. That is a gorgeous image too. What a beautiful
Thank
image.
you.
Well, I know we were talking a little bit about it as we were emailing back and forth. Maureen had told me that you shot an Aperture Priority and that was different for her. And she's like, I think Karolina shoots more like you. And so I shoot Aperture Priority most of the time and in a manual, but my muscle memory is so tied to that now that I've tried
Yes.
to move to auto ISO and I just find myself fumbling. So, and I wait until it's like a situation where there is wildlife, right? I need to practice in like low key situations before I just
Mm,
go out and want like big shots. So, but I do love playing with exposure compensation. It is so,
mm,
that took me a while to get to play with
mm,
that light, and to like in the forest, I have in Indiana here, I have a lot of forest with white-tailed deer. And so to
mm,
wait for that little beam of light to come through the dark forest and then lower by 1 or 2, and just to watch that face just light up so nicely. I just like
it's
once I learned that, it
mm,
took me a while, when you're first learning, you just got to learn, like you said, let's get the sharp photo, the properly exposed photo. But then, like you said, then you get to play and be
mm.
creative. So how important is that to play in wildlife photography? Do you
I think, yeah, sorry, I
go
cut you
ahead?
off
Yeah.
there. But yeah, it's so important, definitely. I think, but you get different types of photographers. I often say that you get the creative-minded photographers and the artistic-minded photographers, and then
Mhm.
you get the technical photographers, and you need to merge those two, and that's when you become a great photographer.
Yes.
And I often, not always, but very often, men will lean towards the technical side and women will lean towards the artistic side. Um, and I must say, the artistic side is more difficult to teach, because I often get those who are on the technical side being like, okay, so this photo, is it good? Like, give me feedback. And I'm like, yes, but, and they're like, oh, but but it's sharp, right? Like this is super sharp. Look at this, and it's correctly exposed, right? And I'm like, yes, it is, absolutely. So, and like you can see the animal and whatever, it's in the frame, and I'm like, yes, but it's boring, you know.
Right,
And I
right,
don't
right.
say that. I don't
Right.
say
But you're
that,
thinking,
but
but it's
I'm
lacking
like,
like magic.
exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, it's a correctly exposed photo. It's sharp, but what else does it have? And that's where like I have the ones on the technical side are often looking for like a correct photo. And I do think it's good to learn like how to get a correctly exposed photo and how to get it correctly sharp and all of that. But you don't need to, you shouldn't get stuck on that. And that isn't a recipe for a good photo. A good, great photo has more. And that's where the creative aspect comes in. And that's where the exposure compensation comes in. And as we spoke about this on email, so I used to shoot on Aperture Priority, and I still teach that to beginners because I find it's easier to get into because you don't really have to worry as much about your shutter speed, and you're not really, when you're beginning, you don't know what is a fast enough shutter speed and how does that work, and it's easier to do Aperture Priority. But then now I shoot on manual with auto ISO. It also works better with the gear that I shoot on now than I used to shoot on. But with both of those, so those are the two options that I recommend. Some people talk about shutter priority, and I think then you're doing yourself a disservice in wildlife photography because you end up having to double think because your aperture can only go that low, and then your shutter speed, you know, so it becomes tricky. But with those two options, you can do exposure compensation with both because you're basically telling your camera I want a brighter photo or a darker photo. And it's important to get into that and start getting creative with exposure compensation because that's when you unlock like the next thing.
I agree. I agree. I'm going to show your elephant photo too.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because it's gorgeous.
Yes, thank you. One of my favorites,
So
I must
unique.
say. Yeah, this is a photo that I was like waiting. I've been wanting a photo like this for years. And it's all about like timing. And this was in Zimbabwe last year, and we had just arrived to the lodge, and we actually decided not to go out on game drive because we arrived quite late. And we ended up just going, this me and my fiance, and we ended up going up for the lookout point and just looking over like the view of the lodge and whatever. And then these elephants came down as the sun was setting and kicking up so much dust. They were running down to the water and they were just kicking up all this dust. And I just saw this shot and I was like, there it is. Like, this
You're like, I've been waiting for you.
Yes. And yeah, so this is done with exposure compensating minus. I think I went, if I remember correctly, like -1 or something like that. And then obviously enhancing it a little bit in post-processing. But I think most of the stuff that I did was just making it a little bit warmer because it was too cold out of camera from a white balance point of view. And then I think I just enhanced the dark a little bit, making sure that that was completely dark with the silhouette and stuff. But otherwise, it's not touched up much in post-processing.
And I also want to point out to people, like, you made sure that the spacing between the baby and the larger elephant was right. Like you can still see that space between them. They're clear. And then that gesture of the one, I don't know what you call it, an elephant, like hoof or whatever. Is that, what do you say for an elephant? With the paw, is
like
that
the trunk?
not a paw, a trunk, but the trunk is up and then the
Oh,
one
the
leg
foot.
is up.
Oh yeah,
I
the
almost
foot.
said paw,
No,
and I'm like, I don't think you say
no.
paw for elephant.
No, just a foot.
Just a foot. But how that one foot is up in the silhouette makes it too, with the gesture. It looks really good. The spacing.
So with that, I must say, like, I obviously took several photos, like, as I saw them, but it is something, and it's a really good point that you're pointing out, because it is something I talk to people about when it comes to photographing silhouettes, is trying to get the timing. Now that they were running, so like I had to just shoot away kind of thing and hope for the best. But when they're walking, it's about finding the timing when they're not behind each other and when you've got that clear elephant silhouette, because otherwise it just looks like a big blob, and you don't get that silhouette. So you want to usually try to have all four legs visible, and get that nice silhouette. So it's a really good point that you're pointing out, because that is something I try to teach when we're photographing silhouettes.
Yes, it's gorgeous. And I forgot to show your favorite animal. I'm going to show that.
Oh yes,
I forgot. I was going to
this one right here.
Yes, it's behind you.
He's right behind us.
So majestic and regal.
Yeah, it's
Gorgeous
the
animal.
most beautiful animal out here, I think.
Mhm.
So it's a kudu for those who
Kudu.
don't know what it's called, which is it's an antelope,
Mhm.
and which is different from your deer that you would get in North America.
Yes.
The antelopes, they have horns, while you guys have antlers,
Mhm.
and the antlers will fall off every year, and they shred their antlers. The antelopes, it's an extension of their skull, so they keep their horns for their whole life,
Mhm.
and it just grows as they grow
Mhm.
older. And yeah, the kudu, I think, just has the most majestic horns, and they just, I don't know, just so regal, so beautiful, and they're quite tricky to photograph actually because they love these thickets.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what I like about this photo is the fact that you can still see like the environment that they live in, which is more thicker area. That's what they enjoy. They don't really like the open fields and stuff. So because of that reason, they're difficult to photograph because they will often be behind bushes and stuff. But yeah, this is one of my personal favorites.
Yeah. Handsome, very handsome. And that leads me to like think about you when you're teaching. You definitely help people walk through their shots. I think that's really good. It's like you're creating a checklist in their head. Okay, get your safe shot. Okay, try an
Mm.
environmental. So can you walk us through kind of like this would be a portrait and then walk us through
Yes.
kind of how you would teach someone if you're next to them on safari?
Well, so specifically with antelopes, the tricky thing with them is that, and what I always teach is the fact that with antelopes, as you're driving, because obviously on safari, you're in a car.
Mhm.
So as you're driving up to the antelopes, that's when they will be looking at you like that.
Right.
And then 99% of the time, once you stop the car and you turn the car off, they will do one of two things. They will either run away because they get startled,
Mhm.
or they will start eating because they're too comfortable with you.
Yes.
So to get that shot of the ears looking at you, like you need to get it as you're driving up. So that's the first thing that I usually let people try it once with like Impala. Like the
Yes,
first
yes.
Impala herd that we drive to, I let them try and they're like, oh no, they looked back again. And I'm like, okay, see, now you know. Next time you get your camera ready before we stop.
Yes,
And
yes.
then I remind them that as I see Impala in the distance and like we're driving, so Impala is the most common antelope that we get out
Mhm.
here. So they're good to practice on. So
Mhm.
as we see them in the distance, I'll tell people, okay, remember now what happened, get your cameras ready. And this is where it is a little bit tricky because it's obviously the technique of you have a car moving and at the same
Right,
time getting your camera ready.
right.
But just at least having your camera up, saves you a couple of seconds of maybe getting that shot of them looking towards you. So that's the first thing with antelopes that I always teach. But then, if you have an animal that is still long enough and looking at you long enough, then you start with getting your portraits, and depending on how close the animal is and so on, it kind of depends. But I go through the settings that you need for that situation. So I'll most of the time be shooting on manual and auto ISO. So then you'll have your aperture the lowest. Again, depending on the lens. If you're shooting on a prime, you maybe don't want it to be on the lowest because the depth of field becomes so shallow.
Mhm.
But for most zoom lenses, which most people have, then having it on the lowest is to basically as much light as possible into the
Mhm.
sensor.
Mhm.
So you already have your aperture set, and then the next thing is your shutter speed. So I usually go shutter speed and exposure compensation as we arrive to a sighting.
Mhm.
Then I let people shoot away a little bit and do their own thing, and then I'll give them ideas of getting creative if the animal is standing still long enough. So then it's like, okay, remember, like, have you gotten your portraits? Remember to make sure you have the horns in the photo, have the ears in
Yes,
the photo,
that's a
don't
good
cut
point.
anything off. Yeah, like make sure you've got that space, so that you're not too close to something and so on. And then, okay, you've got that. Then I usually talk about like you've got your tight, medium, wide.
Mhm.
So you're tight, then, okay, can you get some details? Can you zoom in? Is it close enough for us to get details? Can we zoom in on like just the face alone? And then on purpose, cut off the ears, cut off the horns, just get the face and get something detailed, or maybe just get the ear, or like one eye and the ear, or maybe the details of like on that Kruger specifically, it's got a lot of texture on the horn because it's been
Mhm.
scraping the horn in mud, and that's
Mhm.
quite a cool story to be able to tell that. So on elephants,
True.
we often talk about getting like the texture of the skin and so on.
Mhm.
So then that's your tight shot. And then you've got your portrait as your medium shot. And then can you
Mhm.
zoom out and get the environment? Can we get a shot like that? So that you go through those. And that's kind of like the checklist in your head is like, okay, your settings are the most important, and then can we go through the checklist of different types of photos?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's also plugging into people's creativity. You're getting those shots, but like those tight shots, you've got to think creatively too. And the story, like you said, it's what story is it telling? That's a really good point.
Exactly.
Yeah. And here's a leopard. So someone you pulled out a little bit, and then I think you sent me another shot where you're pulled out even more.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
I possibly, so this I did shoot on a prime, so I have done the cropping in post. So that's obviously shooting on a prime, that's kind of the only option that you've got. But I do have photos from this very sighting. I don't know if I did send that,
I think so.
of
I'll check. This is a beautiful
from a
photo
wide
though.
angle.
Those eyes, wow.
Yeah, they were incredible. And that's, that's the high key type of thing where you've got that bright background already and you go plus and then, okay, so this is from a different sighting.
Good. Yeah.
But it's a really good photo to also use as an example for like including the environment. And this is one of my personal favorites because I think it's quite unique to be able to get a leopard like this in a tree like this and include the environment, and it was beautifully green. But it's also a photo that is interesting from a technique point of view. Like I said, shooting on a prime, you have to think outside the box a little bit if you want to include the environment. So this is actually a stitch of 9 different photos stitched
Oh,
together.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you zoom in on it, you'll see that there's a lot of detail on the leopard, even when you zoom in,
Let me see if I can.
because it's all those photos stitched together. I don't know if you can zoom
I
in,
don't know
but
if I'm trying.
yeah, it's all right.
I'm going to reach forward and zoom. I know that I can do that.
There we go. I hope that this photo I sent was good enough quality,
Yes.
but yeah, so it's 9 different photos stitched together, which helps when you want an environmental shot like this. Yeah, I think maybe I didn't send a high resolution photo.
It's okay.
Just saying that the real one is very detailed.
I'm sure
Um,
it is. Yes. I'm
but yeah, so that's also another thing to get creative. That's like another step that I tell people, to get another like creative ideas. Like, okay, you can actually get a panorama and you can get so much more of the story, and you can stitch the photos together and that way include the environment, still get a lot of detail of the subject. But you also, what the positive thing about that, rather than just doing a like wide angle lens, is that you get the compression of the separation
yes.
between the
Of
subject
the
and the
crime.
background.
Yeah.
So you get that compression still, which makes for a very unique photo that you can't take a photo like this with a wide angle
Right.
lens,
Right.
because you just don't get the same compression.
That is cool. I've never heard that taught like that. That is really cool. And zoom in one more time for everybody. I like how the V of the tree showcases him too, or her. And do you need a subject that's still when you're doing the stitching, like when you're doing the panoramic? Do you need the subject to
Yes.
be fairly still, right?
Ideally, yes, especially if you obviously, the big thing is if you're overlapping 2 frames with the subject in it, then it needs to be completely still. So what I do is that my first frame, if I'm going to do a stitch, then my first frame will be the subject, and I try to make sure that the whole subject is in that frame, so that the next ones I don't have to worry about it too much, because I've got my subject there. As long as the subject doesn't move into one of the other frames, I'm good. So then you have to be quite quick if depending on how much the animal is moving. This leopard was sitting very still, so it's quite
Yes.
chilled. But you take your first photo of the animal in the frame, and then you do the other ones, and you stitch them together.
That's a cool point, because my brain goes, well, you have to go left or right. But that's a good point. Do the animal first and get it in the full frame.
Yes.
While
And what I usually do, like with 9 stitches like this, is very tricky. So I wouldn't recommend doing that on like your first try. To start with like 3. So you start with
yes.
like, and then you can do left to right if you want to. But
Yeah.
usually it's better to start in the middle, and you can go like that
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
But also, what was I gonna say?
Oh,
I lost my train of
back
thought,
to
but
the
yeah. But yeah, you can just have fun with it. Oh yeah, because I find it easier to start with the middle being the subject, and then just getting as much as I can around it. And then if one of them messes up where I'm not overlapping enough or whatever, then I can kind of cut that out of the frame, and I can still get something, and I can play around with seeing, can the composition work if I do it this in this way in
Yeah, that is
post-processing?
super
Because
cool. I have
obviously,
to try that.
Yeah, and when when you're stitching as well, you've got so many megapixels to play with that you can crop however
Hmm.
much you want. So
Hmm.
just have fun with it.
Oh, that is fun. I love that. I'm like, I've
Yeah.
never even thought about doing that with 9.
Yeah.
Oh, that is really cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
If you have questions for Carolina, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we're gonna get to those in a couple minutes. Um, but you shoot Sony, that's right, Carolina, right? You're a
Yes.
Sony shooter now. And
Hmm.
what are your go-to lenses when you're on safari?
And so I've got my 300 2.8
Mhm.
that I just got recently, and that's my ride or die. I love that lens so much. I just got it now like 6 months ago,
Mhm.
and just couldn't be happier with it. It's perfect. And then I will sometimes put a teleconverter on it. I've
Yeah,
got a 1.4 at the moment that I put on it, so that makes it a 420 f4. And then
yeah,
if I'm thinking about getting a two times teleconverter, because sometimes it can be nice to just put a two times teleconverter and then I get a 600 5.6, which is also really good.
yeah.
But I just haven't really had the need for it yet because I've been in areas where we do get really close. So yeah, that's my ride or die for wildlife. But then I also have a 24 to 70 that I have with me as my on my second body, and that's where I get a little bit more creative with like the wide angle stuff,
Yeah,
and yeah, I get
yeah.
a bit of behind the scenes on safaris and for marketing purposes and for my guests and stuff. So that's my other lens. Or if sometimes you can get really close and you can get those cool wide angle things from
Yeah,
there, and
that
those
would
get
be,
really
yeah, that is cool. I remember you
yeah.
saying like, I think Sony had let you use it, the 300 2.8, and you're like, this is dangerous. I felt the same way about the 400 2.8. I'm like, I rented it
Yeah,
one time and I'm like, this is going to be dangerous if I rent
it's
it.
so
I'm
dangerous.
in so much trouble. And it was so true. Like, that's what I usually have. I usually have a 400 2.8 and a 24 to 70. That's kind of what I carry too.
Mm,
And it's
that's
like,
perfect.
that 400 is like, ugh, is the battery. But
It's
the 300
uh,
2.8, that interests me too. I love anything 2.8. It's
two
like,
eights. It makes it makes such a massive difference. But I will say that I've tried the 400 two eights a few times, and the thing for me is that it's very big,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and and it is quite a lot heavier than the 300. So that for me put me off it a little bit after trying the 300 because the 300 Sony is super light.
Hmm.
That's been good for me because then it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, cool. I yes, it's good and it's amazing quality photos, but the 300 is actually better for me. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy with that.
I would
But
think that too, that the lightweight would give you a much more versatile way to be creative and hand holding all the time. There are times when I have to use a monopod.
mm,
Like if I'm out doing
yeah,
moose or something for a long time, I'll take a
mm,
monopod with me, and it helps because it can get in between like sagebrush and stuff with that monopod, but still it limits your ability to move.
it does. And I can imagine, especially because you guys do mostly hiking and stuff, then obviously a monopod is very helpful to just, as you say, like
To
just not
hold it.
standing up all the time.
Yes, yeah.
But me in a vehicle, it's
Right.
so easy. And then monopod actually gets in the way if I use it.
Sure.
And the funny thing is, like with the 300, a lot of the wildlife footage that I shoot, like the videos, are
Mm-hmm.
done handheld.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I always had to stabilize with a beanbag or something, but now with the 300, one being so light and the image stabilization is so good, I shoot handheld video, like video footage, and
That is so
it's
important.
super good.
Yeah.
So that makes a massive difference for me because it's just so quick and easy, and
Yeah.
that for me overweighs the fact that I get 100 extra mils with the 400.
Right, right.
So I'm very happy with my
Yeah,
300.
I can see how that would be really, really good. And I think I
Mm.
have a 100 to 500 too. And I think Maureen probably took that on the safari with you. I think
Yes, she
she
did.
shot
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And I do like that for video much better. The light part of it.
Mm.
Like to
That's the
handhold.
thing.
Uh,
Yeah.
especially if you're thinking about weather too here. Like if it's blowing, like if we have wind or snow or something, and I'm trying to hold and stay steady with the 400, or if
Mm.
I have my teleconverter on it, it gets tough. So
I can
many times I'm
imagine.
scrapping the video. It's that doesn't work. But
Yeah.
you shot Nikon and then Sony, is that right?
Yes, so I used
Yeah.
to shoot with Nikon, and
Yeah.
that's where I started. And simple reason because my dad had a Nikon, and then
Yeah.
when he bought a camera for me, then that's what I used, and so on. So you can use the same lenses,
Yeah.
and I loved it, and still enjoy the Nikon system. That's what you get used to, and that's kind of what it comes down to.
Hmm.
But then at the time when I was wanting to switch to mirrorless because I was shooting with DSLR. I didn't really like the options that Nikon had. Now they've come out with a lot of different options, and I
Right.
think if it was now, I probably would have been found something that I liked and so on. But at the time, I didn't. The only camera that I was interested in, that I felt was a good enough upgrade and that it ticked all my boxes, was the Z9. That
Hmm.
one obviously is very expensive, but then also when I tried it, it's a very big camera because it's got the
Yes.
battery grip and everything. So it's very big and bulky, and I've got very small hands. So as soon as I held it in my hand, and that's what I think comes down to, is like
Hmm.
holding a camera, it needs to work with you. And then I had tried the Sony, and the Sonys are super small, which I know some people find is a negative thing. Well, I find it's a very positive thing.
Yeah.
So the Sonys are very, very small. And for me, that just fit right in my hand, and it was super easy for me to get into the Sony system. I felt like when I shoot Canon, I'm super confused because everything is just the opposite,
The
and I
other
get
way,
like
yes.
I can't. Yeah, so like Canon for me, like they're fantastic cameras and they're great, but for
Yeah.
me, I just can't because I just don't know. It just doesn't make sense in my head.
Yeah.
And the buttons are everything's opposite and so on. But with the
Yeah.
Sony, it was so easy for me to get into the system. It felt like the buttons were exactly where I needed
Yeah.
them to
It's an
be.
easier transition.
Um,
Yes.
Exactly. So that's kind of then why I switched, was because I felt like they had cameras that suited my needs and what I was looking for at the time. And I'm very happy with the switch because I really enjoy the system and
Yeah.
love the
I mean, we've
cameras.
talked about that before on here. Like many, like people will say it had to fit in my hands and fit right.
Mm.
And you just have to find the system that works best for you. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I hate when people, be like, oh, which is the best system and what should I get? I'm like, it completely comes down to your personal needs. And that's
Hmm.
why when you're looking for a camera, it's actually better to try to rent it first before you buy it, or
Yeah.
go to a camera store and see if you can just hold it in your hand and try it a bit and
Absolutely.
ask them for help. Because if I tell you I love this camera, that might not be the camera for you. That's
That's
just kind of
right.
what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
when people ask me, I'm like, you really need to go to a camera store or rent it and feel it. You have to feel it. You can't just decide on Amazon and pick something. You really need to feel it.
No,
Yeah. Well, I think
exactly.
we do have a few questions. So let me
Okay.
put here in the box. Oh, this is Jenny Cannon. I think
Mm-hmm.
you watched the episode with her and Maureen. So this is Jenny. And,
Oh, yes.
and she says, as a woman who would be traveling alone to Africa, when I am able to go, what are some tips to staying safe? And also, what area of Africa would you recommend for first-time safari focused on photography? So, what are safety tips and what area should she go to for her first time?
So I think for safety tips, it's honestly just booking through an agency that can like make sure that they book you into the right places where you will be safe.
Mm-hmm.
A safari is a very safe thing to do, and like it gets dangerous as a woman in Africa when you start like venturing out in a city by yourself. Like that's when it might get dangerous. But if
Mm-hmm.
you go on safari, you are at a lodge with people who take care of you, and like I don't think there's any part of it that would be unsafe for either for a man or a woman. So
Mm-hmm.
for a safari, and as long as you then book through an agency that, for example, like what we help people with is obviously very often people will fly into Johannesburg,
Mm-hmm.
and then they will stay in Johannesburg for a night and then fly over to Kruger. And then what we help with is obviously like, okay, this hotel is super close to the airport. Like, let's book you in there because then you don't have to venture into the city and you don't have to like take a cab anywhere. You literally walk across the road and there's the airport and you're very
Mm-hmm.
safe. So booking through an agency who knows where to book you to keep you safe, I think is very important, and who knows the country and the area, and regardless of which country you're going to,
Mm-hmm.
is very important. But on safari, I wouldn't say there's any time that you would be unsafe. But then for first time for photography, it's very tricky because I'm partial to South Africa and
I
Kruger.
was going to say.
It's just yeah, I'm just very partial. I love the way that things run here. I love the way that a safari is here. That's just kind of just suits me. So I recommend Kruger because it's amazing. Kruger is also very easily accessible. So that does help, especially traveling as a single woman.
Yes.
It's very easy to fly into. You don't have to drive very far and so on. So it's very easily accessible, and the infrastructure is there in South Africa. But then I will say that Tanzania is incredible because it really, Tanzania safari is like very immersive into the culture in a different way that South Africa. And I think that's where South Africa is lacking in the safari aspect. You're not as immersed into the culture as you get in Tanzania. And also from a game viewing point of view, like Serengeti, and from what I hear about the Masai Mara, I haven't been to the Masai Mara myself, but Serengeti is just next level with the abundance of wildlife that you see because it's so open. It's just you're constantly seeing something, even if it's on the horizon 500 meters away, you will see it. Well, Kruger is very thick, so you can't see things that are too far into the bush. So you go longer periods without seeing things, but when you do see something, it will most likely be closer. So it's tricky to say there. I would say like Tanzania is quantity, while South Africa would maybe be quality from photography. One major thing that is important to remember about Tanzania, and what I think makes a massive difference for photographers, is the fact that because you are right next to the equator, like literally right below it, the sunrise and sunset is super quick. So you don't really have golden hour. And in South Africa, you definitely have more golden hour, and you get a better opportunity for that golden hour photography, which obviously for photographers is a massive thing. So that is something to keep in mind, is that you shoot a lot of harsh light photography when you're in East Africa because of the sunset and sunrise.
Yes, that's interesting. Well, I think a lot of what you said is comforting. Like when you said you fly right into Johannesburg and then you tell the hotel. And so that as a person, as a woman traveling alone, that makes me feel much better.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then also, like, I can, as a little plug, obviously, like group safaris
Yes.
and workshops and stuff. I think that can always be nice, and we get a lot of single women traveling with us on our workshops. And I think that's very comforting because you're with a group and you get to know other people and so on. So if you want to travel to South Africa or to Africa in general, but you don't have anyone who you can travel with, then joining a group can always be really really comforting and be a lot of fun. And we literally, like on this last workshop, we ended up having 3 ladies traveling from Florida, all of them together. So they ended up going on the same flight all the way from Florida. So
that's
like it worked
nice.
out
That's nice.
fantastically. Yeah.
That would make me feel good. That would make me feel good. Yes. Okay, Karen asks, any tips on social media? I have been posting consistently and interacting with people on Instagram, and it seems to be working to an extent, but not very much, to be fair. So she's wondering how to boost her social media. And then she has another question after that. But
okay, sure. Yeah, it's a tough one. Social media is obviously a lot of hard work, and I think you can be very consistent with it, and it can still just not take off because sometimes you just need that like one reel or one post that just takes off, and then all the hard work kind of like catches up with you. I think it can be very disheartening and discouraging when you feel like you're posting consistently. I'm putting in the yards, I'm putting in the work, and it's just not working. What can be good to look at, like now, obviously, I don't know your social media, so it's difficult to say, but what can be good to start looking at is like, okay, if I'm doing all of these things, do I maybe need to change something in my content that makes it more engaging and so on? Someone told me once that it's about, don't just change everything, change 5%. So look at what 5% can I just change a little bit and see what works, because you're obviously doing most of it right. So just change a little bit at a time, because if you're changing too much at a time, then the algorithm also gets annoyed with you and it just becomes crazy. So I think that's like looking at, okay, is it something with my content that's not captivating, or like looking at the insights that you get on social media, on Instagram specifically, you get like, okay, this is how many people who saved this is how many people who, like, this is the reach that you got, and you can look at all these statistics and you can kind of look at, okay, what is doing well, what's not doing well. And this is where it's very difficult to also, it's tricky to find the balance between looking at the numbers and being critical with the numbers, because you do need to be critical with the social media numbers, but also not let it discourage you and take it to heart, because it can very easily, and I do it still 100%, and I know I've got a big following and so on, and I can still get into my head where I'm like, my reels are not doing as well as I want them to be, and I get really discouraged and go through periods where I'm struggling with social media because of that, and that never really goes away. So what I try to remind myself of there is like, it's still about putting out what I'm proud of and the work that I like, and I should to an extent look at what works and what doesn't, but I also shouldn't just post things because it will go viral.
Yeah, right.
I should post things that I'm proud of and that I enjoy, because then I'll also attract the right people.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very important, is remembering that it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people behind those numbers. And when I get discouraged, I think about all the comments that I get from people who enjoy my work, and people who book safaris with me, and who buy my editing course, and all those things. That's what matters at the end of the day. So if my reel doesn't go viral, that really doesn't matter. So it's important to focus on that as well, and focusing on rather getting a connection with your audience and with the people who are following you, rather than just chasing the numbers, because at the end of the day, it's the connection with the people that is the most important thing. And the numbers don't actually matter that much, as long as you have loyal followers who enjoy you and your work. That's what actually matters. So it's important to just stay on top of that as well.
That's very good advice. Very good advice. So many good points in there. And it's kind of comforting to me to know that you struggle with it too. Because I mean, I see your account, and I think your account is like so consistently, and it's you.
Oh, thank
and
you.
brand, your branding. And I think that's another thing. Just be consistent on who you are, and stay posting consistent things you're proud of, and kind of not the same look, but like I see some accounts where I'll look through and it's all over the place. And like wildlife and a car, and it's everywhere. But like, try to be consistent. But I think David Duchemin talked about it too when he was on. He said, like, you don't find your worth. If you're looking to find your worth on Instagram, it's the wrong place to find your worth. Don't let it dictate what your worth is. And I think that's what you're saying too. But it's so easy to do that.
It's so easy. And that's the thing. Like, I think it's important to know that, like, oh, I'm glad to hear. Thanks for that comment there. But it's important to know that people like myself who do have a big following, I'm still looking at other people, and I am wishing that I've got engagement that they have.
It
And these people are
stops.
getting hundreds of thousands of views on every reel that they're posting. Like, I need to get there, and I'm still comparing myself to people who are in the next level. So you're always going to compare yourself to the next people. And like, there's photographers that I know on social media that have around like 10,000, 30,000 followers, which is a good amount of followers, 100%, but it's not the massive numbers. And they are doing wildlife photography full time, and are selling out prints, and doing all these things. And they're doing it because they've got a following that is very loyal to them. And if you have 1,000 people that will just like your post and then that's it, then that's not worth as much as 100 people who will buy a print from you.
Very true.
Like, or support you and comment and encourage you. Like, that means so much more than so it's quality over quantity.
I was going to say quality over quantity. It's so true. It's so true. And she also asked, do you have suggestions on how to use our photos for conservation purposes, which we wanted to talk about today. So that's a good question.
Yeah. It's tricky. It depends. I've got a few ideas of like how you can do it. I think the number one thing is, I feel that photography in general has a place in conservation, in the fact of like showing people these animals, and therefore making people care about the animals, and therefore wanting to protect them, telling that story. That's you're already using your photos for conservation, just posting them on social media, creating awareness about these animals and so on, and making people like these animals, then they're gonna want to protect them.
Yes.
But also you could, you can do things like selling prints and doing auctioning prints for conservation and so on. And you don't have to have a big platform for that. You can do that in your, like, think locally. And that's with a lot of these things, when you start working and wanting to work with wildlife photography and so on, it's about thinking locally and like, what can I do in my little community? What
Mhm.
can I do on my local neighborhood Facebook group? Or like, and especially if you are photographing local wildlife, you've got such an in with the people in your community, because these people are still seeing these wildlife, like foxes and whatever might be around. They're probably seeing them in their gardens, or and they thinking, oh, they're a nuisance because they're doing this or that. If
Yeah.
you then can bring out a photo that makes them think differently, then that's going to make a massive difference. And then you can do an auction, uh, you know, at home in your backyard or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
or rent a barn close by and invite friends and family, and you do an auction on a print, and then give that money to
That's a
conservation.
good
Like,
idea.
there's all these different things that you can
Mhm.
do with your photos, and try to give back that way. What I do with my prints is I give a portion of my sales to a rhino orphanage,
Mhm.
and I sponsor a rhino there.
Aw.
So that's the kind of stuff that I do. But you can obviously do even more if you want to, and you can work even harder with it.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on what you have available for you and in what way you want to do it.
Yeah. Those are good tips. Good ideas. And Monty Duncan says, this is not a question, but wanted to mention the great tips that Karolina mentioned. Highly appreciated. Thank you,
I'm glad to
Monty.
hear.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
great. And then Philip Scrimshaw asked, if you had one place to photograph wildlife and it wasn't Kruger, where would you go?
And one place, okay,
This is
not
from Philip, and
Kruger.
Philip is always in Africa. He's been on the podcast just a few
Is it?
months ago, and every time you're like, Philip, you think he's in Seattle working, and then all of a sudden on Instagram, he's back in Africa all of a sudden.
That's
He
brilliant.
just got
That's my type
back.
of
So,
person.
yes, yes. So he loves it.
Um, so for me personally, I would probably go to Chobe, or somewhere in Botswana. Botswana is an incredible country for wildlife in Africa, and very underrated, or maybe it's not underrated, but not many people know about it.
Mm.
Not first time safari goers know about Botswana. The Chobe specifically, I have fallen in love with because of the boats that you're on the Chobe River. So for those who don't know, it's a big river that you can go on boats and stuff, and even houseboats. It's big enough for that. And then what that does is that you get a completely different perspective of the wildlife that is coming down to the water to drink. And you just get these unique angles and unique photographic opportunities that you can't get anywhere else. So especially elephants, if you like elephants, go to Chobe. It's the best place in Africa to see and photograph elephants, because they are everywhere and they are in the water
I
and
would
they
love
are
that. Yeah.
so happy, and like
Mhm.
it's the most magical thing. And then birds, there's incredible birding on the Chobe as well. And then if you go in winter, you might have a chance of big cats coming down to the water, which obviously is is a very cool perspective to get and so on. But also hippos and crocodiles and like all of these incredible animals around the river. Chobe is a very, very special place for that.
Yeah. And if people want to see that, they can check out your YouTube because you do have videos on that and it shows you exactly how it works. And you said it's much
Mm.
easier for you to teach too, because you can walk around. That makes
Yes,
sense.
exactly. So yeah, so on the boat, so this is with Pangolin Photo Safaris that I freelance for and work with. So I've got trips with them coming up later this year, and then next year I'm also doing trips with them.
Mhm.
And they are kitted out for wildlife photography. And why the Chobe is amazing, and the boats that they have there is they spacious, but they're not like massive boats, but they're spacious and have this one row of chairs, and it's gimbal chairs. So you've got
Very
your like
cool.
gimbal and everything on it. It's amazing. And they are in this down the middle, and then there's enough space to like walk around on the boats, like behind the chairs and so on, and have your camera bag there if you want to and so on. And
Mhm.
that for me, as you say, as a teacher and as a photo host, as we call it makes a massive difference, because I can
Yeah.
walk behind my guests and I can literally look at their screens as they're photographing and see what they're doing and give pointers live in a different
Yeah.
way than I can in a vehicle. I
Yeah.
try my best to do that in a vehicle as well. I always try to sit in the very back seat to be able to see people's cameras, and I get a different feeling of what people are doing than when I'm in the front seat, because I can see where like the cameras are being pointed and the
Right.
direction. And if people are struggling to see a bird or something, I'm able to help them find that a lot easier, and
Yeah.
then be able to give feedback kind of live, looking at their screens, and they can quickly show me the photo they got, and I say, okay, try this or try that, maybe change that setting, this setting, and it makes a massive difference. I love the boats on the Chobe.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm just sitting here thinking about it. Like, you came from Sweden and you weren't sure what you're going to do. And now
Yeah.
you're all over Africa in hides and boats and in your safari vehicles. And like, you just have to look back and be like, this is so amazing.
Yeah. No, honestly, I pinch myself sometimes that like this is what I ended up doing. And
Yeah, yeah.
if someone would have told me 10 years ago, like, oh, this is what you'll be doing, I would have been like, no way, no.
I know. I feel the same
Like, you're
way because
joking. That's not me.
I feel the same way because I was a teacher and then like did like to raise my kids, I did part-time things like magazine editing and things like that. And then just to find the, wildlife photography, which I'd always loved national parks and wildlife, but just wouldn't spend money on myself for the cameras. And then once the kids got older, I did. And to find myself here, I'm like, I just would not have predicted it. That I would be
Yeah.
like
And that's,
riding around with this big lens, so happy,
it's amazing. It's the most magical thing. And for
It really
me,
is.
oh, Marine.
Is she on?
Oh, that's so, yes,
She
she
got
just
on. There
commented
she
on the,
is. Oh, she
oh, that's
woke up. She
wonderful.
did a night shift last night and she didn't think she could join
Oh,
us. Oh, I'm
shame.
so glad you could join us, Maureen. So
Oh, it's so good to
I
see
was gonna
her.
end today with her two questions. So we'll end with
Oh,
Maureen's
okay.
questions. Yes. And then she says, what animal have you not photographed that you would love to photograph one day?
That's a pangolin. It's an easy one to answer. I still haven't seen a pangolin. For those who don't know what that is, it almost looks like an armadillo, but it's not related to an armadillo at all. But it's a scaled animal, and they're very, very rare to see, and highly endangered and very poached as well. They the most trafficked animal on the planet. So they're just incredible animals. Highly nocturnal, highly secretive, and I have never seen one in my 7 years of living in Kruger,
Oh my
and
goodness.
that's just highest on my
Well,
list.
the Philip that I was just talking about, he was on a few times ago and he has a picture of one and found one. So if people have been listening to the
Oh,
podcast, they got to see the picture and hear his story. So he's probably listening thinking, I just saw one and Carolina's been there 7 years.
yeah, yeah.
So I think he saw one just stumbling through the grass. Everyone else was watching lions, and he saw it, and he's like, "Everybody, you have to look at this. We can't believe
That's
this is happening."
amazing.
Yeah. So he said
Wow.
it was just. He said it's still, even though it might not be the most like creative photo, it is a great just shot of one, and he's like,
Mm,
it's still my favorite photo because I
yeah.
got to see it. Yeah, that's so
It's
cool.
it's like, you don't even think that they may be real. Like they're
Yeah,
just so magical. So
yeah.
yeah, that's very, very
And many
special.
people haven't heard about them. So it's good whenever
Mm,
people do talk. People are talking about them more, I think now.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. And Maureen asks, what animal have you photographed that you still are waiting for that one perfect shot?
Ooh,
You've
that's a
gotten it,
good
but you want to get one that's even
question.
like you've got something visualized that you want.
Mm. Um, I feel like I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, oh, I still don't have a great photo of this. But I'm trying to remember what animal that is.
Well, you have
Um,
so many animals.
yes, we do have a lot of animals. That's the thing. So that's the beautiful thing with Africa and being on safari and Kruger, and that it's just there's animals everywhere, like antelopes, for example. I always talk about antelopes, that
Mhm.
there's so many of them here, and there was antelopes that I didn't realize existed
Mhm.
until like 3 years of living in Kruger. There was a new antelope that was like, oh, look at this spok, for example, and I was like,
Wow.
this exists? Like this is there's another animal that I didn't know existed.
Just the
And
abundance.
that's just, yeah.
That's
But I think
crazy.
maybe For me, it would be maybe one of the like nocturnal animals, like porcupine, for example. I
Mhm.
don't have a photo of a porcupine,
Mhm.
and I've seen them a few times, but you often see them mostly at night. But yes, I would love a good photo of a porcupine. That would be
I
very
think
cool.
Maureen just got some this last week at Antelope Island in Utah. I think she just had a little
Oh,
encounter with a porcupine. Yeah. I've only seen the same. I've only seen them snuffling along and like right at dawn. And it's so dark I can't get a photo. So yeah, I would love to see one too.
I see she just commented here and said that you need a Yellowstone bear, and I
Yes. Oh,
definitely
yes. Come
do
shoot with us. Come
100%.
shoot with us.
Yeah.
It would be so, so fun.
Yellowstone is very high up on my list because I see this other question here from
Yes. Yes.
Greg. Yeah, for those of us dream of going to Africa, where do you dream of going? And Yellowstone is very high up on my list.
Mhm.
I've wanted to go to Yellowstone for the longest time, so that's definitely. And I follow a lot of wildlife photographers like you guys, some that
Yeah.
are in Yellowstone, and I see just
Yeah.
all these amazing photos. So I would love to go to Yellowstone. And then I'm also high up on the list is also India for the tigers, which I'm
Oh,
going to
yes.
next year. So
Oh,
I'm
you
very, very
are. Oh,
excited about that.
good. How
Yes.
fun. How
Yeah.
fun. That
Mm.
would be, I can't wait to see your images from that. They're going to be beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
you know that you have people that will take you everywhere in the Tetons and Yellowstone if you want to come. I'm sure
Yeah. No,
Maureen would
I
love it.
definitely need to. I need
And
to.
I would make her, I'd be like, you are letting me tag along.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let's do the speed round quickly. And
Cool.
I sent them to you ahead of time so that you kind of know.
Oh, I think I just skimmed through them. I don't think I
It's okay.
read
It's
them
okay.
properly.
Just say the first thing that comes to your mind. So,
Okay.
what's in your camera bag that you have, but you could do without?
Oh, that I could do without
Like it's in there, but you
probably.
never use it.
Yeah, I've got this little like this little mount thing that you can put on the hot shoe of your camera and that you
Yes.
can put your phone on it.
Yes.
And I try to use it because it's cool for behind the scenes, but I end up never using it. So I could probably do without it.
I have the same
Because
thing.
I
I have
just
the same thing. I
yeah,
saw yours on YouTube. I'm like, I have the same thing and I never use it.
yeah.
I never use it.
No.
Well, what's something in your
Uh,
camera bag that you can't live without besides your camera body and your lenses?
oof. My probably the scarf that I have
Mhm.
for like throwing over my gear in dusty conditions and stuff.
Mhm.
I've had that with me for like 6 years now, and it's the same little scarf that I bought in one of the park shops the one time,
Yeah.
and it works fantastically for what I need it for, and always have it with me.
Yeah, I think, and everyone can check out. Karolina has a YouTube on gear that she packs and gears that she takes. But I think something that I really appreciate about some of the things you say, sometimes you'll say like you got things secondhand or you something like that. And it's so important because we're all trying to piece this together to be able to afford it. And like, there's a lot of gear besides camera stuff that goes along with this, the clothing, this,
Yeah,
that little scarf that helps so much. So I was going to tell you that I really appreciate that when you say that. So
yeah.
it's like it's
No,
real
it's
life.
important. And it's important people know that it's also not just like you don't just go onto like Amazon and be like, okay, I need to this.
Right,
It's
right.
kind of stuff that you also accumulate over the years that you're like, okay, I feel like I need something like this in my bag, then let
Yeah,
me get that. And
yeah,
I'm missing this, so let me get that. And
yeah. And some of the best
yeah.
things I've found secondhand. Like when I went to Alaska last year, I wanted the Marmot rain jacket, and I went to my local thrift, and there was one there for $5.99, $5.
That's
And
amazing.
I'm like,
Wow.
how could I? So if you kind of just start watching, and
Yeah.
you can save money so that you can spend money on trips and gear.
Exactly. No, I'm a big fan of doing secondhand, and I've started knitting now recently. That's my
Oh,
new thing.
nice,
Um,
nice.
to knit my own stuff. So
Yeah,
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 just doing slow fashion and secondhand stuff, and I'm a big fan of that stuff.
yeah. Me too. Me too. What's your favorite snack while editing or driving around Kruger?
Oh, biltong, definitely.
What is that?
Yeah, so biltong is like South Africa's version of what you guys would call jerky,
Okay, yes.
beef jerky.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think
Hmm.
ours is a little bit drier if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken. But yeah, it's South Africa's version of it's dried meat.
Yeah.
And it's very safari and it's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes.
And
Other people have
yeah,
said that on the podcast too, like their beef jerky to drive around Tetons and
yeah.
Yellowstone. Yep. That's another answer we have. Do you have a favorite photographer or author or artist or even a book that you kind of like think about? or that
Oh, I
inspires
do.
you?
Yeah, so there is a book called Jock of the Bushveld,
Mm-hmm.
that is a South African book
Mm-hmm.
that's about this guy. It's a true story, and it's about a guy who, in the late 1800s, I think, early 1900s, he is a traveler and what do you call it, like a tradesman.
Mm-hmm.
So he travels basically from, like, I think Johannesburg down to Maputo, and he in Durban and stuff. And so he travels kind of through what today is Kruger National Park
Mm.
with his dog that he adopted, who was the like runt of the litter. And then he's a stuffy, and he basically writes about their adventures, like going in these wild
Oh, that's
places,
fun.
traveling back and forth, and a lot of other animals as well that are along the journey. His horse, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
the oxes and stuff that they use. But the beautiful thing about that book is that he describes the bush in a way that I've never seen anyone else describe, and the animals in a way, like there's a section on the kudu, for example,
Mm-hmm.
where he describes how majestic the kudu is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think his way of putting it into words, because I think I can't put it into words. That's why I do it through photography. I just love the way he puts it into words. And that I often think about that. And I have a few photos in mind that I like connect to sentences in the
Oh, I
book and
love
segments in
that.
the book that I'm like, I'm looking out for photos that I want to actually, on Marine's question,
Mm-hmm.
one photo that I have in mind that I haven't gotten yet is of impalas running and jumping.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of them together. I want like a kind of messy chaos photo of all the
Mm-hmm.
impalas just running and jumping. Because in that book he talks about how impalas are the most beautiful when they're running.
Oh,
So yeah,
that is
that's my
cool.
favorite book.
That is cool. And I was going to ask you earlier about the chaos shot. I have never heard, I guess, I
Oh,
mean, I never have heard someone say that, take the chaos shot. And I was like, that is such a good way to put it. And I need to put
yeah.
it in my checklist. I need to get it in my checklist.
Yes.
And then um, what wildlife experience just really filled your soul or filled you emotionally?
Yeah, wow. Do you mean like a specific sighting
Yeah, do
or
you have one
like
that
a
sticks
trip?
out that you just were like, it brought you maybe to tears or you just think about it again?
There's one sighting where we found a very young leopard cub, that is definitely one of those very special sightings that
Mm-hmm.
I feel very fortunate to have witnessed. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that there was like a 4-week-old leopard cub, and we
Oh,
ended up finding the mom, and we just thought she was just chilling on a rock because we didn't know she was pregnant. I think we knew she was pregnant, but we didn't know she had the cubs. And then she was just chilling on the rock, and we were like sitting there watching her, and then all of a sudden this little fluff ball comes out of the rocks, and we realized she had the cub. Yeah,
oh, you just
that
never,
was very
that's the thing. I
special.
think that's what keeps us going back is like just the
Mm,
magic of those kinds of things that happen that you get to
yeah,
witness that other people don't witness. It's just so amazing to see those things. Um,
yeah.
and then someone wanted you to mention the name of that book one more time for them.
Jock of the Bushveld. I'll write it down in the chat.
Okay.
Um,
And people can look that up and read it because it sounds beautiful. And I was thinking, his creativity and the way he uses words, like we
mm,
all have different ways to be creative. So he uses
yeah, I
his
think
words
his
and now it's
name.
matching with you. It's so cool. And your
Yeah.
photography, that's so cool. Two creatives coming together years and years apart. That's very
Yeah, exactly.
so
Yeah,
neat how
shame
that works.
the author isn't alive anymore. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
send him my photos or something and tell him thanks for the
Oh,
beautiful
that's
words.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Karolina, I thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on with me. It was so fun. I knew it would be. And I've just really enjoyed like watching your YouTube. Everyone, can you tell people where to find you? And that
Oh yeah, so on all socials, I'll put it in the chat here as well.
okay. Yeah.
On all socials, this is my
Hmm.
handle,
Hmm.
and on YouTube, it's just written apart, so it's just
So
like
it's
this.
Karolina Norée Wild. You can find her on
Yeah,
Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, her website. And
that's
then
my
on your
website.
website, you can find your tours.
Yes, so on the website, there's a little section called Safaris, 2026 Photo Safaris. So there's the list of the ones that are already up for 2026, and then there's a few coming soon.
Yeah, and I mean, you just launched dates today for 2026, so everyone can get on
Yeah.
today. That's good. And then you have prints available there as well.
Yeah, I've got prints
Yeah.
available on my website. They ship worldwide. And if there's a photo that you've seen on my Instagram that's not on the website, because I've been a little bit bad at updating it,
It's hard to
then
do.
you can you can let me know, and I can just put it up on the website for you and make it available as a print.
Yeah.
And then I also have my editing course there on
Yes.
the website as well.
Yes. And what can people watch over the next year, a year or two? What are the next big things coming up? Besides you're leading your own safaris and you're doing tours with you're freelancing some other tours, but what other big things?
Yes.
Anything else coming up that we can watch for?
No, I think right
That's
now it's just
enough.
the same of the of the stuff. I'm keeping busy trying to get everything together. But yeah, definitely more trips next year.
Yeah.
In general, like I've got the tigers in India doing that next year, and I haven't really spoken about that on social media because it's sold out before I could post it on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that is in about a year from now, because you have to book India so far in advance because you need to get the permits in time and so on. Then so that trip is in 2026, and then after that, I'll definitely do. I'm sure I'll do 2027 as well, as long as that one goes well. But I think it will. 2027 as well, and already have a list of people who are interested in that, which is amazing.
Oh,
So
that's
if
so good.
anyone else
I'm
is
so
interested,
happy for you. Yes.
yeah, no, it's fantastic because then I'm able to plan how many trips I can do, and then I can maybe do back-to-back trips. So if you guys are interested, like let me know, because then we might plan more trips to make sure that everyone can come with.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, that's kind of, and then just in general trips in South Africa. And then I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, we'll see if
I don't
maybe
know how you're adding up anything else.
yeah, I'm hoping to continue bringing out more. I'm wanting to, but this is probably in a little bit more of a further future. I'm wanting to create a photographic course the same way I did my editing course, but do a photography course. That's just going to take a lot longer for me to create because I think I need to have a lot more examples out in the field and stuff.
Yeah.
But that is something that I want to create in the future. So
Yeah, that would be great.
hopefully I'll
You'd
find
be
time
really
for
good
it
at
one day.
that. Yes. I think that would be
Thank you.
a resource people would like. Yeah. Before we got on, I said, I don't know how you're doing all this. You're doing all your safaris, your YouTube, and YouTube takes forever, and your social media, it's like all of that takes forever, and you're doing really well. So don't be discouraged when you see those numbers on your reel that goes down. You're doing really well.
Thanks so much.
Really, really good. I'm so thankful that you were on with me today. It's just so nice to meet you, and hopefully our paths will cross again in
Yes, thank
real
you so
life,
much for
maybe
having
someday.
me.
Yes, that would be great. And thank you so much for everyone to joining us. You guys were a great audience today. Great questions from everyone. Next week on May 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Canon Canada Ambassador Jackie Matichuk will join us. And so I'm really looking forward to talking with her too. So, but thank you so much, Karolina. It's been a joy to meet you, and I just wish you the best.
Thank you so much for having me. And it
Yeah.
was an absolute pleasure to be
Yes.
here. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
We'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.